In the European Union, they suddenly became eager to talk to Vladimir Putin and rejected the claims that Russia is ready to attack NATO countries soon. Europe's rhetoric regarding negotiations with Moscow has changed dramatically. On one hand, the leaders of the United Kingdom, Germany, and France, after meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in London, demanded that Vladimir Putin immediately cease fire and begin negotiations for a peaceful settlement in Ukraine. Overall, the leaders of European countries have stated their 5 conditions for starting negotiations to end the war. And this comes after Vladimir Putin last week refused an open letter from Vladimir Zelensky in which he proposed to finally hold a personal meeting to reach an agreement on ending the war. On the other hand, Donald Trump's close friend, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, suddenly publicly questioned whether Russia intends to attack a NATO country in the near future. And he immediately added that it is still necessary to negotiate with Moscow. And suddenly, Russia and Ukraine might have a new mediator in the negotiations. US President Donald Trump wants to involve Jerusalem Patriarch Theophilos III as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine to help achieve a ceasefire. Well, in general, let's discuss together what will come out of all this. My name is Alexei Pichi, and before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the episode, and leave any comment you want. And subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, met with the European trio to discuss future actions to end Russia's war against Ukraine and to develop another joint position. The leaders of the United Kingdom, Germany, and France, after meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, demanded that Vladimir Putin immediately cease fire and finally begin negotiations for a peaceful settlement in Ukraine. The joint statement by Keir Starmer, Friedrich Merz, and Emmanuel Macron was made after Putin last week refused Zelensky's proposal to meet in person and start negotiations. And according to the statement after the meeting of the 4 leaders in London, in a peace agreement, Russia will have to agree to 5 conditions to ensure a just and lasting peace. Among them are the immediate and complete cessation of hostilities and the current line of contact. The current one will become the starting point for negotiations, and international borders must not be changed by force. Ukraine must receive security guarantees, including the deployment of multinational military forces. Russia's assets worth hundreds of billions of dollars will remain frozen until it compensates Ukraine for the damage caused by the war. And Europe's security interests must be ensured. And now the leaders of the European trio have supported Volodymyr Zelensky's idea of holding direct negotiations between him and Vladimir Putin, in which the US and European countries will take an active part. And next, I will quote Zelensky: "Russia is not winning on the battlefield, and our medium and long-range strikes are limiting its ability to expand its aggression. But it is also extremely important for Ukraine to ensure protection against ballistic threats, which the Russians use to terrorize our cities and communities." So here it is. The head of the European Union's Foreign Policy Department, Kaja Kallas, stated that the Allies must increase pressure on Russia, since in the country, meaning Russia, there are some shifts indicating growing dissatisfaction with the continuation of the war. I should note that the day before, Zelensky wrote an open letter to Vladimir Putin saying Russian citizens are tired of the war and Moscow lacks the funds and political strength to keep buying the loyalty of the Russian public. Today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei said the political situation lacks strength to keep buying the loyalty of the Russian herd. Today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Zelensky's letter followed his earlier comments about fatigue and Moscow's lack of resources. But in this story, a new outline of future negotiations suddenly begins to take shape, and a new scheme is being formed in which negotiations to end the war could be implemented. Finnish President Alexander Stubb expressed doubt that Russia intends to attack one of the NATO countries in the near future. And now I'll quote him. "Why would Russia want to test Article 5 on collective defense of the North Atlantic Alliance if it hasn't managed to conquer Ukraine in 4 years? During World War II, it took Russia 4 years to reach Berlin. Isn't that awkward? They covered 1,600 kilometers, so why would Russians now want to test Article 5 on collective defense of the North Atlantic Alliance in an active war with Ukraine?" He says hybrid actions like sabotage are awkward for the alliance, right? "Cyber attacks against NATO countries from Russia will always happen, quote, so you just need to calm down." I understand the public discussion, but I look at all the intelligence reports and study the articles very carefully as a group. But then Defense Minister Stubb surprised many people. He suddenly stated that Europe simply needs to start peace negotiations with Vladimir of the alliance, quote, "Negotiations with the Russians are only possible when they are not in a position of strength. We must do this together with the Americans." Well, let me remind you that Stubb is a big proponent of collective responsibility, isn't it? And now Trump is also trying to explore the possibility of negotiations and is looking for some new formats. Trump wants to involve the Jerusalem Patriarch Theophilos III as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine to achieve a ceasefire. This was reported by the Israeli publication Ynet. According to the publication's source, the Patriarch may act as a mediator between Moscow and Kyiv and help the parties, including the North Atlantic Alliance, if necessary. Sources of the publication claim that as part of this initiative, the Patriarch already has a meeting scheduled with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the end of June. Washington believes that Theophilos III is trusted by both Russia and Ukraine and also participates in humanitarian and diplomatic initiatives. However, according to his interlocutors, the article refers to the collective defense of the North Atlantic Alliance, which is considered morally uncomfortable in the Orthodox world. Let me remind you, Theophil III has headed the Jerusalem Orthodox Church since 2005 and is considered one of the most influential figures in Orthodoxy. And I should also note here that the German government had previously noticed a slowly opening window for dialogue with Russia. The article on collective defense of the North Atlantic Alliance, if you pay attention to the latest actions of the Europeans, it becomes obvious that they are now looking for a format for dialogue with Moscow that EU countries would consider legitimate. Russia is proposing, for example, uncomfortable, a single negotiator from the entire European Union, for example, Gerhard Schröder. Europe has already rejected this idea. Well, in addition, the negotiations will have to be conducted in full coordination with Ukraine and the US, and this also in a way complicates the process for Europe. Why exactly check the article? The goal of collective defense of the North Atlantic with the European alliance, if in London, is it inconvenient here? Ellipsis, your opinion, your conclusions, write in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone. The process for Europe. And it was for this purpose that Zelensky held a meeting with the European trio in London. I'll put an ellipsis here. Share your opinion and your conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.